Good morning. On behalf of Bangabandhu Center for Bangladesh Studies in Canada and Conflicts and Resilience Research Institute, Canada, I welcome all of you to this virtual webinar session, and we are reminded of the solemn occasion that brings us together, the 53rd year anniversary of the Bangladesh Genocide. Ladies and gentlemen, and the audience, it is night in Dhaka, Bangladesh, and 53 years ago, the military machine enrolled in the streets of Dhaka. The final act of genocide unfolded. This event was a dark chapter in human history that claimed the lives of millions of innocent people, and it is crucial that we remember and understand its significance. Through this webinar, we hope to honor the memory of those who perished, offer a platform for reflection, and create awareness about the atrocities that occurred during this time. We believe that commemorating this event is not only a responsibility we owe to the victims and their families, but also a necessary step in our collective journey towards creating a more just and peaceful world. Before we begin, let me do the treaty recognition. Bangabandhu Center is located on the original lands of Anishinaabe, Cree, Ojibwe, Dakota, and Dene people, and on the homelands of Metis Nation. We acknowledge the mistakes done in the past, and we are promise bound to work together in the true spirit of reconciliation and collaboration. Dear audience, we are deeply honored, and I'm really grateful to have the honor and privilege to moderate today's webinar session titled Honoring the Legacy of Bangladesh Genocide, Finding Hope and Healing Through Remembering. The Bangladesh Genocide was a tragic event that occurred during the Liberation War in 1971 as the last act. It resulted in the loss of millions and left countless others traumatized. Today, we remember those who lost their lives and acknowledge the deep pain and suffering endured by the people of Bangladesh during this time. The purpose of our today's webinar is to discuss the importance of recognizing the genocide for reconciliation. We believe that remembering and acknowledging the past atrocities is essential to building a better future. We want to create a space for dialogue, reflection, and healing. The speakers we have with us today come from different backgrounds and have diverse perspectives that includes an ancestor of genocide victim. They will share their insights and experience on how we can find hope and healing through remembering. Dear audience, I shall not dwell in reading out elaborate biographies of our esteemed speakers at the outset, rather shall briefly introduce them as they appear. Today, we are also very honored to have our Foreign Secretary of Bangladesh, People's Republic of Bangladesh, Mr. Masood bin Momen, Senior Secretary, and as I said, Honorable Foreign Secretary of People's Republic of Bangladesh as chief guest. So without further ado, let me welcome our Honorable Foreign Secretary of People's Republic of Bangladesh for his special speech. Thank you, sir. Floor is yours. Please unmute, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Kausar Ahmed, our moderator, Dr. Kullur Rahman, our High Commissioner to Canada and Chief Patron of Bangabandhu Center for Bangladesh Studies in Canada, distinguished discussants from home and abroad, representatives from academia and civil society, and scholars. A very good morning to you all, although it is evening here in Dhaka. It is my honor to participate in today's webinar, honoring the legacy of the Bangladesh genocide, finding hope and healing through remembering. I would like to thank Bangabandhu Center for Bangladesh Studies in Canada and Conflict and Resilience Research Institute, Canada, for inviting me. I want to begin with paying my deepest respect to the 3 million martyrs and 200,000 women who suffered extreme forms of violence. I also remember the father of the nation, Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, who led our War of Independence. Our tributes to the victims of another Black Night, 15th August 1975, where we lost the father of the nation and most of his family members. Distinguished guests, The genocide occurred during the 1971 Bangladesh Liberation War was a traumatic and devastating incident that left deep scars on all of us. It is a rare incident in the history of mankind. The genocide of 1971 was deliberate and well orchestrated. The Collaborators Order 1972, the International Crimes Tribunal Act 1973, the International Crimes Tribunal Bangladesh Act 2010, and the designation of 25th March as the Genocide Day by Bangladesh Parliament in 2017 are all major milestones and progression in our journey to deliver justice to the victims of the genocide and uphold human rights and the rule of law. The 25th of March, which is now being observed at home and abroad, provides us with a formal occasion to honor the genocide victims and educate people about Bangladesh genocide. We also refresh our commitment towards the recognition of Bangladesh genocide by the global community. It sends a clear message that such crimes would not be tolerated and that those responsible must be held accountable for their actions. Distinguished audience, Bangladeshi diaspora played a very significant role in raising awareness of the Bangladesh genocide and bringing it to the attention of the international community. During the Liberation War, many Bangladeshis fled the violence and sought refuge, particularly in India, UK, but also in Canada and USA. They were the eyewitnesses of the genocide, and the global community was more convinced after hearing their accounts of the mass atrocities. The Bangladeshi community around the world organized protests, rallies, and other forms of activism to draw attention to the atrocities that were occurring in Bangladesh. The Bangladeshi diaspora also played a key role in providing humanitarian assistance to the victims of the genocide, including through the establishment of relief organizations and fundraising campaigns. Ladies and gentlemen, the then military junta imposed strict censorship on the local media, preventing them from reporting on the true events and of the extent of the violence. However, some foreign journalists and international media were able to report on the situation and document the atrocities. Media gave a voice to the victims. Distinguished guests, 52 years since then, we're about to lose the generation who lived through the genocide experience, the experience of losing family members and friends, witnessing horrific acts of atrocities. As we talk about transitional justice, it is our responsibility to equip the successive young generations with adequate knowledge about 1971 Bangladesh genocide. We need to work out a sustainable and smart mechanism to pass down the genocide stories from generation to generation. We also need to let the global community know more about the genocide of 1971. We need to disseminate our genocide information not only to seek remedy of the past, but also to fix the course of our future as members of the global community. The horrific memory of the Bangladesh genocide, if communicated properly, can raise global conscience to avoid the repetition of such incidents in any form at any corner of the world. The recognition of 1971 genocide will help strengthen our resolve and commitment as global community to prevent the recurrence of such crimes. I therefore call upon you all to delve deep into Bangladesh genocide and disseminate the facts worldwide. I also call upon you to support our efforts in earning the due recognition of the 1971 genocide. I would like to request our diaspora to put their best efforts in strengthening our demand for the recognition of 1971 genocide. And our diaspora in North America, particularly in Canada, are playing a commendable role in this regard. Before I conclude, I thank Bangabandhu Center for Bangladesh Studies in Canada and Conflict and Resilience Research Institute Canada for organizing today's webinar, which will add momentum to our demand for recognition of Bangladesh genocide by the global community and the prevention of genocide from recurring anywhere in the world. Today's keynote speaker will, of course, play a great role because of his stature, Dr. Gregory Stanton, founding president and chairman of Genocide Watch. We thank you very much for being with us today. I thank you all. Joy Bangla, Joy Bangabandhu. May Bangladesh live forever.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for the inspiring words. And most importantly, the recognition of the genocide is one of the prime agenda of the Bangabandhu Center and Bangladesh High Commission in Ottawa. The audience, let me welcome His Excellency, the High Commissioner of Bangladesh in Ottawa, Dr. Khalil Rahman, at this stage for his opening remarks. And I must acknowledge the support of the High Commission in pursuing the case in Canada and also supporting the Bangabandhu Center in pursuing the issue with regards to recognition. Honorable High Commissioner, floor is yours, sir. Go ahead.
Thank you, Dr. Kausar. Good morning to those who are joining us from North America, and good evening, those colleagues, friends, brothers, sisters in Bangladesh. Uh, in fact, my boss, the Foreign Secretary of Bangladesh, has already spoken. So he has outlined what Bangladeshis and the government of Bangladesh like to see in North America in terms of remembering and recognizing the genocide. So I won't be going into that at all. As High Commissioner and especially as Chief Patron of the Bangabandhu Center for Bangladesh Studies in Canada, just I like to appreciate the role BCBS is playing in collaboration with Creek uh, Liberation Army Museum in Dhaka and Genocide Center for Genocide Studies in Dhaka University. So I thank you all the organizations that have made this submission to the Canadian Museum for Human Rights for remembering and recognizing the genocide that took place in 1971 in Bangladesh. I would also like to thank Dr. Jeremy Maron for visiting Bangladesh to see in your own eyes what happened there, and also to talk to people, even the victims and family members of the victim, policymakers, experts, that how it happened in Bangladesh and the extent of this devastation, this massacre. And I would also like to thank Professor Adam Muller for visiting Bangladesh. You had the same experience. I hope your contribution or your understanding of this massacre would be really helpful for creating awareness against genocide anywhere in the world, and also to remember and recognize the genocide in Bangladesh. I heard a lot about Mr. Gregory Stanton. We really were very grateful for your contribution, for your support to recognize the genocide in Bangladesh. I know you visited Bangladesh. You are a good friend of Bangladesh. Professor Imtiaz Sir, I know your contribution from the Center for Genocide Studies in Dhaka University. You are all, experts in this area. I'm not an expert. I'm just supporting the Bangabandhu Center. Imran Azad, very young, I think, genocide expert. So I know how he was so supportive during the visit of Professor Muller and Dr. Maron in Bangladesh. So we'd like to collaborate with you in future. Hilal Mohiddin Bhai is one of the person from Creek, has been involved in the recognition of genocide in Canada. So I just, I have nothing to say, but to again reiterate my support, my commitment to your work, so that the genocide that happened in Bangladesh is known to everybody, at least in Canada, because I'm High Commissioner here, and it is finally recognized by this country. Not only it is displayed in the Canadian Museum of Human Rights, I'm talking about the exhibits and evidence. So that is my expectation, and I'll be always there to support your initiative, your efforts in this regard. So thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much for your kind remarks. The audience, now it is time to invite our keynote speaker, Dr. Gregory Stanton, to the floor. And before I really request him to speak, as you all know, he doesn't need any introduction at this stage. He is the founding president and chairman of Genocide Watch, and his organization and is following the case of Bangladesh genocide quite intently. And just a couple of days ago, we have received a notification to vote and support the case of genocide through the International Association of Genocide Scholars. So without further ado, Dr. Gregory Stanton, sir, floor is yours. Please go ahead, sir.
Thank you. It's a really great honor for me to be with you again. Um, at this time last year, in fact, I was in Bangladesh and I was there with the Honorable Mr. Masood bin Momen, who was your foreign secretary. A really amazing person, by the way. I think Bangladesh is very, very fortunate to have such a gifted public servant there and representative to the international community as well. Um, I was also there, of course, with other people who will be here on this panel in other circumstances. Uh, and it's a special honor for me to be able to speak to your organization in Canada. Canada is far ahead of the United States in acknowledging our own denial of genocide. Um, as you know, the whole edifice of colonialism in the United States and Canada was built on genocide. Uh, we denied the even existence of our Native American populations here in both Canada and in the United States. Uh, but the difference is that in Canada, you now recognize this, and you have the beginning of this meeting was a good example of it, where you acknowledge that the land, the very land that you stand on, uh, was taken from Native Americans. I think that is a wonderful example of how people should acknowledge their own uh, past genocides and also to acknowledge the ongoing effects of those genocides. So that is, for me, a special honor to be able to work with you here uh, in this forum that's sponsored here in Canada. Um, we have not gotten that far in the United States. The US Congress has never apologized for our genocide against Native Americans. And as you know, it is a continuing genocide. We still have reservations in which uh, death rates and the other indicators of mortality are so high that you have to conclude that this is a continuing effect of genocide. I want to talk to you, in fact, today about the purpose and the consequences of denial, because that's what's going on here in the United States about our own Native American genocide and also what has happened with the 1971 Bangladesh genocide. Um, the denial of this genocide is a continuation of the genocide. It and the reason it is because it's a continuing attempt to destroy the victim group psychologically and culturally, and to deny its members even the memory of the murders of their relatives. Denial is, in other words, a continuation of genocide. Uh, some of the purposes of this denial are not necessarily very apparent to those who are deniers. The first purpose that I would just like to point to is that denial is used to validate national and ethnic origin myths. For deniers, it's a defense against self doubt about their group identity. Nations and ethnic groups have myths about their origins that take on sacred meaning. For the US, the origin myth is manifest destiny. That myth holds that North American continent was empty, that it was set aside by God for a new nation led by white Europeans. In other words, it was founded on white supremacy. We have yet to acknowledge that. This myth was the justification for the genocide of Native Americans who already occupied North America. The myth even held that most of America was terra nullius, unoccupied and undeveloped. And because of this origin myth, Americans have always denied our genocide of Native Americans. I grew up in a time when the famous Western movies were so popular. And it was always, you know, that the cowboys who wore the white hats were battling against the so-called Indians, and who were portrayed as somehow primitive and uncivilized and warlike and violent. In fact, it was the white Americans who were uncivilized and warlike and violent. Uh, the myth in the United States is that the genocide was a self-defense. It was a self-defense against hostile Indian tribes that attacked peaceful white settlers. Denial is a defense of the origin myth, in other words, of the United States of America. The origin myth of Pakistan is that the nation was created to protect Muslims who were persecuted in India. And even though Pakistan included two parts, its unity was necessary, according to this myth, for the self-defense of Muslims against Indian Hindus. Pakistan used this origin myth to justify its genocide against Bengalis when they asserted their independence in 1971. The genocide, in other words, was a self-defense against separatism. It was portrayed as a counterinsurgency. The common theme in both of these denials is defense against enemies within the nation. So let's look then at some of the consequences of this denial. The first is that denial continues the genocide of both the victims and their survivors. Denial continues the trauma of genocide. It transfers the trauma into the future for new generations. Denial prevents the open wounds of genocide from ever healing. Every society is made of families who are bound together by love, but every family member will eventually die. As my father used to remind me, Gregory, the mortality rate is still 100%. But all families have a desire to honor and bid farewell to their dead. And that's why all around the world, funerals are ways that every society affirms that the dead have departed, but that life will go on. Death doesn't have the last word. Denial closes the door to mourning. The reason why people who commit genocide bury victims in mass graves or throw their bodies into rivers or the sea is to deny them personhood. Genocidists try to deny the final triumph of life. They, in fact, affirm that death is the last word. And that's why recognition of genocide is so important. The survivors need public acknowledgement of their trauma and their grief. Silence tells survivors that they grieve alone. Genocide recognition is the public ritual of collective responsibility. It is the acknowledgement of our common humanity. Denial of genocide is what the Pakistani and the U.S. governments and other governments today are still doing to citizens of Bangladesh and to Bengalis around the world. Neither the Pakistani nor the U.S. governments nor any other governments should be party to this kind of denial of an historical fact that is as profound and important as the 1971 genocide of the people of Bangladesh. Elie Wiesel repeatedly called denial a double killing because it strives to kill the memory of the event. After all, look at what Hitler said before the Holocaust. He said, "Who, after all, speaks today of the annihilation of the Armenians?" In other words, he was acknowledging that through this kind of denial, it was a justification for genocide. And around the world, victims of genocide, and that is what we're doing here today, we ask first for recognition of the crime that was committed, against the people of Bangladesh. Recognition of genocide is as essential to healing as closing an open wound. Without such healing, scars harden into hatred that cripples the victim and cries out for revenge. Secondly, denial harms the perpetrators and their successors. There have never been any trials in Pakistan of the generals who perpetrated the Bangladesh genocide. Trials are the best antidote to denial because they lay out the facts, in fact, in a way that can be challenged and that has been challenged. And that's why it's important to have trials after genocides. It's why we've worked so hard, for instance, to constitute the Yugoslav Tribunal, the Rwandan Tribunal, the Cambodian Tribunal, and other tribunals to actually tell the facts about these genocides. But if we can't have trials, at least we can have years of public education. In fact, even after trials, you need years of public education. There were no trials of the U.S. Army generals and the state governors in the United States who ordered the genocide of Native Americans. Governor Stephen Austin of Texas actually gave bounties for killing Indians. And the U.S. Congress has never even apologized. The Bengali Nobel Prize-winning poet Rabindranath Tagore renounced his British citizenship. He has announced his British knighthood over the massacre at Jallianwala Bagh. And Britain yet, even today, has never formally apologized. So we see that effect also, of course, in Turkey, where we have a denier nation still denying the Armenian genocide, and by denying it, also making it possible to commit other genocides against other people, because the Turks are still committing genocide against their own Kurdish people and Kurds in northern Syria and Iraq as well. They're trying to suppress the self-determination of the Kurdish people. This is the kind of effect that long-term denial has on a government and a country. The Pakistani government says it didn't commit genocide. Why, I ask, is it still saying this? Is it so hard to recognize a genocide that was committed by a military regime, not the current government in Pakistan? Is it so hard for the United States to acknowledge our own role in the 1971 genocide? We, after all, quote, tilted toward Pakistan during that genocide. Our President Nixon and Secretary of State Kissinger even found ways to surreptitiously send arms to Pakistan during the 1971 Bangladesh genocide against the specific prohibition of Congress in the United States. Why should this be so hard? Germany has acknowledged its role in the Holocaust, and now it is one of the strongest democracies on earth. The third thing is that denial harms the bystanders. It allows the power of the perpetrators to go unchallenged. Recognition is a moral rebuke to the perpetrators. Countries that recognize the truth about the Pakistani genocide in Bangladesh are still considered enemies by the ISI, by Pakistan's extremist Muslim intelligence service, who, by the way, was really the origin of the Taliban in Afghanistan. The Taliban have been supported by the ISI right from the start. It's time to pass a resolution in the United States Congress to recognize our own role in the Bangladesh genocide and to apologize for it. We were complicit. We should not expect our government to be intimidated by Pakistan, who is still not acknowledging its genocide in Bangladesh. And fourth, denial harms the truth tellers. A joint congressional resolution recognizing and commemorating the Bangladesh genocide would honor America's extraordinary foreign service officers who risked their lives and their careers to report on the Bangladesh genocide of 1971. So today, let us commemorate not only those who died in the Bangladesh genocide, but also the people who told the truth about it. One of the things we will talk about at the end of this session today is why that is so important. Let us celebrate Consul General Archer Blood, who told the truth about the Bangladesh genocide in 1971, who told the truth in the dissent channel in the State Department, was ignored, and after that, never got another diplomatic appointment. So let's honor both all of those who died in that terrible genocide, one of the worst genocides in all of history, and also those who told the truth about it. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. It is such an inspiring and uplifting words from Dr. Gregory Stanton. And I always keep traveling the large swath of history, how the genocides can impact and have consequences. Thank you for giving us these opportunities, Gregory. Ladies and gentlemen, let me welcome Professor Dr. Imtiaz Ahmed now, because he has a commitment and he's traveling now. And thank you for being with us. So please go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Kausar. The Foreign Secretary, good to hear Gregory once again, and nice to see Adam and Jeremy, and of course the High Commissioner. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. And I see all the faces, all the known faces, including my young colleague Sadeka Halim. No, I think Gregory has been, straightforward in putting his position, and I think it's time that some of the important countries in the world who talk about, rule of law, transparency, who talk about democracy, talk about human rights, suddenly fall short of when it comes to 1971 genocide. And it doesn't, it has puzzled me all throughout, because as Gregory was pointing out, it's not the same United States you have. It was a different United States altogether back in 71. So why not recognize now? Now, one of the reason, and I'm not, it's my personal opinion, maybe because Henry Kissinger is still alive. That may be the reason that I think they're going slow. So maybe after a few years, when he will be no longer with us, maybe that will be the time when United States will recognize, because there are complications, as Gregory is pointing out, and I'm quoting him, that we were complicit. And of course, Kissinger was complicit to 71 genocide. So that may be one of the important reason as to why United States is going slow. But I think it's time that those who are denying 1971 should come forward, because when it comes to evidence, when it comes to the very definition of genocide, the fact of intent to destroy, it's now so clear. Even my university, and both Jeremy and Adam has visited Dhaka University. If you look at just the killing in Dhaka University alone, and if you look at the faculty members, probably Dhaka University, when it comes to genocide, it probably would be one of the largest, number of victims that you get. 20 faculty members, 20, and out of 20, 4 were Hindus, and the rest were Muslims. So it clearly tells you the intent to destroy. And they were from faculty of, pure science, from business, which had nothing to do, with politics at all. So and from philosophy. So if you just, concentrate on Dhaka University alone, I think you can easily come up with the argument as to why it was a genocide. But as Gregory was pointing out, I think uh, maybe this whole issue of denying uh, is a kind of a mindset also, given the history, particularly of the United States. And if the United States, comes out agreeing and pointing out that this was genocide, I believe, the countries which were with the United States at that particular time would follow suit. We are hopeful, and Foreign Secretary has pointed out, though it's been quite late in terms of globalizing the issue, but I believe the government is on the right track in globalizing the issue. I think the Ministry of Foreign Affairs can use the 80 plus missions that it has in making this particular day, and also through those 80 plus missions, uh, disseminate genocide in all the languages, because that has been the other limitations, because some of the francophones and some of the arabophones countries, particularly their public, are not familiar with 1971 genocide. And there I think the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Bangladesh can play a very important role, translating some of the documents, even some of the documentaries that were made into those languages, so that those public can put pressure on their respective governments for recognizing the issue of 1971 genocide. I'm very hopeful, and the way, probably the easiest way would be to have a statement passed at the UN General Assembly, as it was done in the case of the Rwanda way back. So I guess that could be one of the ways to get recognition, particularly on the issue of justice. So I'm very hopeful. I think some of the works that Gregory is involved in, and I've heard him, more than twice, I think, because he was in Bangladesh. I've discussed with Jeremy and Adam. If you look at some of the developments that have taken place in last 10, 12 years, the kind of research that have come up, last 10, 12 years, I think we are in the right track. But as I said, this is one issue. It needs to be highlighted, not because of Bangladesh alone. And this is, I want to flag it very importantly. It has to be flagged for their own sake, for each of the countries' own sake. That's very important. Otherwise, you will get into new genocides. That's the point. So the very recognition of 71 genocide will be a big step in stopping other genocides. And I think that should be the reason why we should be working on 1971 genocide. So I'm not going to take much. I have to run to another event. I'm outside. I'm not in Dhaka. Stuck in another meeting, but I'm quite positive, and I congratulate this particular platform. But let's work, continuously, and I believe we will see a day when 71 genocide will be globally recognized. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Imtiaz. I think these are very important words, and the work's being done in order to get the recognition of Bangladesh genocide. Thank you for joining with us. The audience, let me welcome now Professor Dr. Adam Muller, and is very close to us, and we both live in the same city. So Dr. Adam Muller is the Director of Peace and Conflict Studies Program in University of Manitoba, and he has been to Bangladesh recently. And his today's talk could be centered on genocide and reconciliation. Adam, floor is yours, sir. Please go ahead.
Thank you very kindly, Kauser. I appreciate being here. It's also lovely to see the distinguished Foreign Secretary again, Honorable High Commissioner, and so many distinguished colleagues and friends. During my time in Bangladesh in late January and early February, I was struck by several things of note in relation to the 1971 genocide. First was the energy and dedication of the students, faculty, and mentors I encountered at the 8th Annual Winter School organized by the Center for the Study of Genocide and Justice and the Liberation War Museum. I think congratulations are due to Emran Azad and his colleagues on doing a fine job creating such a rich and varied set of opportunities for participants to learn about atrocity crimes, genocide prevention, traumatic memory, and the ongoing work of repair. Second sort of takeaway, big takeaway for me involved the Liberation War Museum itself, which I think is a superbly conceived and curated institution devoted not just to preserving memories of the Liberation War, but to locating the war and its related genocide in the context of a lengthy history of Bengali resistance to attempts at outside domination and oppression, including the post-partition Bengali language movement that helped to consolidate Bengali national identity in the process in important ways, laying the ideological and cultural foundation of the independence struggle that culminated in the Liberation War. Third, though, was the widespread, powerful, very strong view, which I found expressed by scholars, government officials, and members of the general public, that the 1971 atrocities perpetrated by the Pakistani military and related militias against Bengali non-combatants needed to be recognized as a genocide internationally, but especially by the government of Pakistan. Now, upon returning to Canada, I will admit to being somewhat surprised to almost immediately start receiving correspondence from Pakistani Canadian individuals and groups expressing a range of concerns with my visit, as well as the possibility that my research in Bangladesh might in some way contribute to international recognition of the Bangladesh genocide. I was also contacted by the Pakistan High Commission in Ottawa, who expressed similar concerns, as well as a worry that my work, or maybe its outcomes, might in some way damage otherwise generally positive and stable Canadian-Pakistani relations. Now, without going into the specifics of these exchanges, this kind of outreach and the anxieties upstream of it has got me thinking a bit more deeply about what genocide recognition is and why it matters to different groups of people, perhaps most especially the victims and the perpetrators of genocide. And I'm very grateful to Greg Stanton for his wonderful keynote remarks, because I think my own remarks sort of shadow his in important ways. My understanding of genocide recognition has been profoundly marked by my involvement in Canadian debates about and public advocacy in support of the claim that European settlers in this country have perpetrated a genocide against Canada's Indigenous people. The conclusion that there has been a Canadian genocide was one reached in different ways by both the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada and the federal government's inquiry into missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. In explaining the significance of the work undertaken by the TRC to gather testimony and compile an archive of documents detailing the abuses suffered by children attending Canada's network of Indian residential schools, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission Chair, Murray Sinclair, explained that, and this is a quote, "The survivors have entrusted us, and by extension all the people in Canada, with two priorities. First, the survivors need to know before they leave this earth that people understand what happened and what the schools did to them. Second, the survivors need to know that, having been heard and understood, that we will act to ensure the repair of damages done." So in his remarks, Sinclair identifies two tasks lying at the heart of any project seeking to do justice to the survivors of traumatic violence. First of these tasks is determining exactly who the victims were, what occurred to them, why this happened, and who was responsible for their victimization. Second, the second task is engaging in the work of individual and social repair with a view to reconciling perpetrators and victims. And I think it's important to recognize that this second task is actually a forward-looking one resting on the hope that people linked through a shared experience of violent perpetration might be able to escape or transform a legacy of hatred, fear, and distrust into something like a sustainable peace. I think it's also important to note that for Sinclair, this second task crucially depends on the first one. In other words, the work of repair requires us first to understand and recognize who did what to whom and for what reason. In a related way, the psychologist Irvin Staub has written with regard to genocide recognition that recognition matters to victims of genocidal violence for essentially two main reasons. He says, first, our identities are rooted not only in our group, but in the history of our group. For a complete identity, we must be integrated not only with our individual past, but also with our group's past. Perhaps this becomes especially important when our group is partly destroyed and dispersed. Our families and ourselves have been deeply affected, and in a physical sense, we have at best fragments of our group. Second, he says, we have a profound need for our pain and suffering, especially when it is born of injustice, to be acknowledged, known, and respected. Staub is aware that any group or community is sustained not merely by its ability to tell and share stories about itself and its traumas, but also by having those stories and the identities resulting from them recognized by various, well, let's call them significant others. Indeed, the failure of significant others to recognize or otherwise legitimate the means used by individuals and groups to make sense of themselves as selves and as communities can do real harm to those individuals and groups. This view lies at the heart of philosopher Charles Taylor's understanding of what he calls the politics of recognition, and specifically his conception of the harms associated with the withholding of recognition. On Taylor's view, and I quote, non-recognition or misrecognition can inflict harm, can be a form of oppression, imprisoning someone in a false, distorted, and reduced mode of being. Due recognition, he goes on to say, is not just a courtesy we owe people. It is a vital human need. Genocide recognition, then, can be seen as empowering and dignifying. It grants something essential to a people whose status as a people has been subjected to annihilatory force. Recognition also challenges the idea that perpetrators may act with impunity. It forces perpetrators and their allies to accept responsibility for their actions in order to be held legally, morally, and historically accountable before their former enemies and neighbors, as well as before the world. As we reflect today on the significance of the Bangladesh genocide of 1971, we might do well to recall the words of UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, Michelle Bachelet, who observed in relation to the suffering of the Rohingya and the Yazidis that, quote, we must do everything possible to hold those responsible to account, not only because it provides justice for victims and punishment for perpetrators. It matters because ending impunity is central to ending genocide. Prevention and punishment, the explicitly stated twin aims of the Genocide Convention, can never be seen in isolation from one another. Punishment is key to prevention. Impunity is an enabler of genocide. Accountability is its nemesis. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Adam. I am always an avid listener of Dr. Adam's expression of genocide and why it is important to recognize. Thank you, Adam, once again. Dear audience, let me bring our dear friend Jeremy Maron to the stage now. Jeremy is the curator of Canadian Museum for Human Rights, and we have deep appreciation for his time spent in Bangladesh in the last month. Jeremy, please go ahead, sir. Floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Kauser. Good day to all my fellow panelists, to all the attendees, and a big thanks to the Bangabandhu Center, CRIC, the Bangladesh High Commission, especially Your Excellency, for organizing this important commemorative event and for the invitation to share some remarks from the Canadian Museum on behalf of the Canadian Museum for Human Rights. Today we gather to honor the legacy of the 1971 Bangladesh genocide, commemorating the brutal campaign of indiscriminate violence undertaken by the military leadership of West Pakistan to destroy the ambitions for Bengali sovereignty and independence in what was then East Pakistan. As the birth of Bangladesh amidst these attacks testifies to, these efforts of eradication failed. And just as the people of Bangladesh refused to give up on their efforts for self-determination against overwhelming odds, so too has Bangladesh refused to allow the memory of the atrocities that marked the birth of the country and the memory of those who fought for this to be erased. As has been mentioned by some of the previous speakers, I recently had the opportunity to travel to Dhaka, an opportunity I'm very appreciative for, at the generous invitation of the Liberation War Museum, to visit some sites related to the 1971 genocide and to meet with genocide experts and museum professionals. And during this visit, it was very clear the importance of remembering in Bangladesh was omnipresent, as these sites that I saw and the individuals with whom I met strive to ensure that the memory of those who were lost is preserved in defiant rebuke of the annihilatory efforts of the 1971 genocide. Many things during my visit struck me, and one of them that struck me very profoundly about the memorial efforts in Bangladesh was the importance of names. During the walking museum tour at the University of Dhaka, a very innovative experience walking museum tour created by Professor Ahmed, at this tour of the University of Dhaka, where faculty, students, and staff were indiscriminately killed as Operation Searchlight began. The names of those killed, when known, are featured prominently on memorials. Just as one example, the Major Canteen, which was a center of student activism and a center of the liberation movement, and thus a prime target of Operation Searchlight, is now named for Medhuzuddin Day, who ran the canteen and was one of those staff members killed on March 26, 1971. This emphasis on the public display of names signified to me a personalization of collective remembering, recalling that those who were killed in mass atrocities are not numbers, but individuals, each of whom had an identity, who loved and were loved, and had inherent value as human beings. I also had the opportunity and the privilege to meet with descendants of victims who are working tirelessly to ensure the memory of their loved ones is not forgotten. And this work serves as a reminder that the atrocities of 1971 are not only historical, but constitute a trauma both collective and individual whose legacy continues to loom large to this day. These visits and meetings were very powerful and emotional. The history that was laid bare so awful and almost unthinkable, yet at the same time there was hope. Hope from descendants and hope from those that care for this history, such as those wonderful staff members at the Liberation War Museum. Hope that by preserving this memory so that people can learn from it, that such atrocities can become unthinkable and that the international community may never again be silent in the face of such atrocity. And this term never again, which carries with it so much optimism, but is now viewed with so much skepticism as atrocities are perpetrated again and again, to draw in the words of our Canada's former Justice Minister, Irwin Cotler. But I think what Bangladesh is trying to do by preserving the memory of 1971 is very much informed by the ethos of never again. And this became very clear to me in the final panel of the Genocide exhibition room at the Foreign Service Academy in Dhaka, which I had the opportunity to visit. And this final panel includes two photos side by side. One photo from the 1971 genocide and another from the Rohingya genocide, a photo from 2017. And part of the text on this panel reads, Bangladesh, victim of 1971 genocide, stand by Rohingya victims of the 2017 genocide. And I found this to be a very powerful statement that shows an enactment of what never again can mean, or of what one of the things that never again can mean. That the experience of being victimized in a genocide is fueling a collective, empathetic, and human rights-based response to an ongoing genocide in the present. And this response is a clear example of one of the reasons why remembering such difficult pasts and commemorating them through museums like the Liberation War Museum and through programs like our gathering today is so important. For it is silence, for it is an unwillingness to remember that human rights violators rely upon, as this silence creates a vacuum of dissent, and to draw on some of the language that some of the previous esteemed speakers said, creates an opportunity for impunity. Bringing these atrocities to the light of day through remembrance, commemoration, and education is the first step towards creating a human rights culture where we can begin to put the ethos of never again from philosophy into action. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jeremy, for all the kind words and reflecting upon his visit. The audience, let me welcome Professor Dr. Sadeka Halim, who is patiently waiting in the wings, and she's the chairperson of Department of Sociology, and she's also an advisor to Bangabandhu Center for Bangladesh Studies, and her support for this center is duly recognized. Professor, floor is yours. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you very much. First, I would like to thank Bangabandhu Center for Bangladesh Studies to organize such a discussion on genocide that occurred in Bangladesh. I'd like to begin by expressing my honor and grief for those who were brutally killed when actually the genocide began in 25th March in 1971. We have distinguished guests here, and most of the topics actually and the major issues have already been raised. But I would like to start by saying that, of course, it is very true that Bangladesh emerged as an independent country in 1971, experienced the most devastating genocide of the 20th century. There is no denial to it, and I do agree with the keynote speaker, Mr. Stanton, that who rightly pointed out that there should not be any denial to such heinous crime. The massacre actually that took place in Bangladesh in 25th March, and it carried on for 9th March. It was systematic, and in 25th March, it was deliberately done by Operation Searchlight. And we need to take into consideration that to declare it as a genocide, still we are, kind of lobbying with the higher level researchers, scholars, the pressure groups, the lobbyists, and also the diaspora community. And I must congratulate the diaspora community along with other researchers and the scholars and our foreign friends, and as well the local, politicians and the researchers, that it is between 2021 and 22, three led organization actually have recognized the genocide that occurred in Bangladesh as really genocide, and which is, of course, need to be taken into consideration. But the shocking part is that the Pakistan government, as Mr. Stanton again rightly pointed out, that yet to prosecute those perpetrators in accordance with the international laws, and who are still living, and those actually chalked out the heinous plan. And as Mr. Muller, who recently visited Bangladesh, but unfortunately we did not come across him and could not hear his speeches that he delivered in Bangladesh, but he rightly pointed out that there should be a lot of research done, and the root causes of this genocide need to be digged in, and who did it, with what intention. And as Mr. Stanton also pointed out, that we need to know about the impacts and at the same time the consequences. He drew a lot of examples from developed countries, and where those countries, they are kind of champions in terms of practicing rule of law, good governance, gender equity, but still they take a backstage in terms of when the question of genocide comes. I had the opportunity to study in Canada, and I did my MA and PhD from McGill University, and I know that the philosophy of that kind of country and the ethos that they practice. But unfortunately, when we look upon the big countries, for many reasons, they are still they are not doing what they are supposed to do. So there are several points that I would like to ponder on, which is very important, that we need to give recognition. As our Prime Minister, Honorable Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina, she has rightly said that 25th March should be declared as International Genocide Day. And also, I must say that for the researchers and those who are deeply engaged with this particular issue, that the why genocide was not even locally discussed that manner, that way we are now discussing. Because after the brutal killing of the father of the nation, Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, in 1975, kind of we silenced, about this issue. If you take from 75 till 96, nothing was said in terms of genocide. In 96, Army League government came into power, and then in 2000 they lost, and again from 2000 there was a silence till 2008. Then when the Army League government came, back again in 2008 and 9, they started looking into it, though it took some time. But now we must say that kind of we have kind of geared up with this particular issue. So this is very much important to take into the political regime shift in terms of dealing with the genocide, particularly when you take Bangladesh as a case study. And all these initiatives, I think, would pay tribute to the innocent millions who were the victims of Bangladesh genocide. And Pakistani Janta, they did it deliberately. And because they want to silence the right to self-determination that we aimed at. And the right to self-determination, I know it's a very huge, complex concept, but among many things, what does it say? It says that we wanted to speak in Bangla, not only speak in Bangla, but we feel Bangla in everything, like the Bengali nationalism that they wanted to kill. Of course, they used religion as a tool, as one of the speaker already mentioned, strategically, but that did not keep Pakistan united. So this is where we need to ponder on. Another one issue is that secular Bangladesh and independent economy, among many. The other issue is that when this genocide took place, not only the Pakistani army or the Pakistani officials, their brainchild, everything worked against us. Also, there were auxiliary forces. There were people from within whom we label as Rajakar, Al-Badr, Al-Shams, and they were, kind of politically belonged to pro-Islamist group Jamaat Islam, which was banned after the independence. But still, today, what we see, that they are not, in kind of like a political party, but like there are some organizations, they will be talking like them. So the denial, as Mr. Stanton rightly pointed out, that this is really going to cripple those affected people. I'm not going to call them victims, because to me, as a sociologist, I find the word kind of derogatory, because if we were victims, now you would have not seen me talking in terms of genocide, because we know how to retaliate, to stand on our feet and talk about it. So I think this is going to cripple our mindset, actually, and to reinforce those political forces, those who kind of lobbied and helped and assisted. What Dr. Imtiaz rightly pointed out, that 20 professors were killed from the University of Dhaka. There are many other professors in public universities, the intellectuals, the cultural activists, the women journalists. No one was spared, along with other civilians. So this needs to be taken into consideration. Another major issue that no one touched on, that 200,000 women were raped, molested, whom actually Bangabandhu called Birangana, that's meant war heroines, but he couldn't do much because he was brutally killed. And then it took so long. Now, the current Prime Minister in 2015, she passed a law in the parliament and gave recognition to those Biranganas, the war heroines, as freedom fighters. So still we are kind of making list. So what I would like to say that of course we need to pay a lot of attention, and also we need to do the real right kind of research before, in 10 years time we'll not even find them, those who are alive. Recently I came across a book by a young scholar, and she actually interviewed some war heroines, and then some of them talked to her, some of them kept silence. Silence doesn't mean that she doesn't want to talk, because she protested but she didn't get justice. So if this genocide issue is not taken into consideration, like by the Pakistani government, if they do not seek apology, if they do not give international recognition, as Mr. Stanton said, that I echo with him, that this type of heinous crime would go unchallenged, and we will see repetition. We have already seen repetition in Myanmar and the Rohingya community. So with that note, I thank the organizers for inviting me as one of the participant and speaker in this session. Thank you so much. Joy Bangla, Joy Bangabandhu, long live Bangladesh.
Thank you, Professor Dr. Sadiqa Halim, for your inspiring words. The audience, it is time to bring Dr. Tawhid Rezanur into the discussion. He's a visiting scholar, SUNY Binghamton, United States, and the founding General Secretary of Projonmo Ekattur, Projonmo 71. It's an umbrella organization who studies and researches on Bangladesh genocide. And he's also the ancestor of one of the slain professors in Bangladesh. Dr. Noor, floor is yours, sir. Please go ahead. If you unmute, sir. Go ahead, sir. Yeah.
Oh, could you hear me now? Okay, yeah. Thank you very much. First of all, I'd like to thank the organizers for this very important webinar, organizing this very important webinar. And this is especially the theme that you have selected that goes with, I believe, all the citizens of Bangladesh who had been grossly affected with this genocidal episode. And I myself had direct experience, or direct, I'm from direct victim family. My father was a journalist. And before telling about that, I need to say one thing from Sadiqa Halim's point. She mentioned one thing that our Prime Minister, she had demanded about a day to be declared as the International Genocide Day. There is the 25th March. But I believe she's very serious about that. We all know. But this would be a bit, I'll say, a bit impossible demand, because already a day has been fixed for commemorating all the genocide that took place all over the world. That is 9th of December. So what would be our demand, what I believe, that Bangladesh genocide that had been occurred all through this 9 months time, that is to be very duly recognized. So anyway, my father, his name Sirajuddin Hussain, he was basically with the daily called the Ittefaq, is a Bengali daily, very widely circulated at that time. And this was mainly promoting the Bengali righteous movements and Bengali nationalistic demands under the leadership of Sheikh Mujibur Rahman. And my father and Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, both of them were classmates during their studentship in Islamia College in Calcutta during mid-1940s, just before the partition. They had very close friendship, intimate friendship, and they actually maintained that until my father was actually passed away, or we lost our father in December 1971. So they had very trust to one another. During that time, you know that during 1950s, 1960s or 1970s, at that time, the communication mechanism was not modern or advanced like this, but we now actually um, now we have all around us. So basically, the newspapers were the means of communication, other than the pamphlets, posters. So this widely circulated daily, Bengali daily, that was helping people to motivate regarding our rights, the way West Pakistanis were subjugating us. So all the democratic rights that we are trying to demand, that was being campaigned through that newspaper. And you know that most of the time Mujibur Rahman was behind the bar. So in absence of him, so is my father and his editor Manik Mia. Both of them were actually trying to campaign. So two very strong contribution I need to mention about my father. One is regarding 6-point that was that was demanded by Sheikh Mujibur Rahman in 1966. So my father was the person who was very strongly campaigning for this for these points, 6 points. This is basically to demand autonomy. And also during 1970 election time, there were many cross currents, because there are many attempts to cancel or postpone this election. But it was my father supporting through his dailies in favor of the election. So finally, the election actually was held, and we know the result that came out. So anyway, then in at the end of our liberation war time in December, there was a systematic intellectual killing by Al Badr and Al Shams. They were actually formed under the umbrella of Pakistani army, and most of them were recruited from young Islamic fanatic groups, political parties, and their students' wings, Islamic Chhatra Sangha. So those people were basically recruited to listing out the intellectuals, abducting them, and torturing them, afterwards kill them. And before that, when actually this war started, at the time the war started, on 25th March night, the paper, this Ittifaq and the People, there's another English paper that was supporting Awami League. So those two papers were demolished, machine gun. And my father was also inside the newspaper house along with some of his colleagues. But very fortunately, they actually could survive. But at the end of the war, these people, the Al Badr Al Shams, they identified a big list, and they started actually abducting intellectuals. So after the surrender on 16th, surrender of Pakistan Army on 16th of December, just after 2 days, on 18th of December, the killing field, it's called Rayar Bajar killing field, was discovered. And over there, many bodies of the intellectuals were found, but not my father and many other journalists. At that time, 13 journalists were picked up from Dhaka city. So anyway, also not only in Dhaka, also outside of Dhaka, many intellectuals were abducted and killed. After 20 years, in 1991, after 20 years of our liberation war, in 1991, we, the children of the martyrs, we formed this platform called Projonmo Ekattur, Generation 1971. Because the way we grew up, we had very bitter experiences, because in a society, post-genocide society, the way actually one should have some experiences, we gathered all those. But anyway, in 1991, when we formed this platform, then for the first time in 1991 in December, we actually had been to that killing field. Actually, we decided, because we all know that there was a killing field, but we never visited over there. So we decided that we should go there and we must try to do something so that it is preserved. Then we made a small team and we go there in December. You cannot believe that within this time, in this 20 years time, the place remained almost as like as it was in 1971. Only the dead bodies are not there. The picture that we see, only if you just remove the dead bodies, almost that place is like that. There was a brick field. So then we talked with, it was a very emotional travel for us. We talked with the person, owner of the brick field, and we told him that we have a plan to actually lay a stone here, and if possible, we'll actually make a demand so that this place is preserved. So, demand to the government and also others. So then he was very he listened to us, and he was helping us. Finally, we laid the stone after 20 years. And just let me show you two pictures from my mobile phone. Just be with me. If you can see, I'm not sure. This is the picture. This is the picture from 71. You see in the brick field. I'm not sure whether you could see. There's a face actually coming out. In that way, the whole area was with dead bodies like this. And after our demand, then that place is right at the moment like this. I'm not sure. Could you see this? It is like it is with a very black stone and a very big brick wall. So it is preserved nowadays like this. And when I'm talking about this experience, the reason is I had been to Cambodia, and over there I visited Killing Field. So when I had been there, I had a understanding. Before Killing Field, I also visited 12 Strong. There's another torture cell of a school, based on a school. So we have similar kind of torture cell that is called Physical Training Center. Over there, the intellectuals and other were actually taken over there and tortured, and finally taken to the killing field with buses and other means of transport, and they were brutally killed. So what I actually think about that that physical training center is not properly what should I say, that is preserved. There should be, the whole history should be written over there, as what is in Tuol Slong we see in Cambodia. So this kind of work we need to do. So I believe our government will take care of that, and also the person from the museum, Jeremy Maron, who has visited, I believe they can also help supporting with some good ideas as well. So anyway, regarding recognition, what I'd just like to say that recognition is needed because it is very efficient way, this recognition, to prevent crime to happen like this in future. So that's why recognition is very much needed, as well as it is because of to ensure justice. So what Professor Stanton was indicating about justice, I believe we have that act. So that may help us also to think about those killer or the perpetrators to bring under. I'm talking about the Pakistani perpetrators. So in that way, actually, there is a politics in case of recognition. Very fortunately, very recently in the last year, Genocide Watch and also Lemkin Institute for Lemkin Institute for Genocide Prevention. Both of these US-based organization, they have published published declaration acknowledging Bangladesh genocide, and also another US-based organization, International Coalition of Sites of Conscience, they also acknowledge. And you know that there is a bill or one resolution submitted in the with the two congressmen. Recently, it has happened. So this is something that actually we need to carry on. Now we have friends like you all, I believe, and over time, all of us are actually taking this very seriously. So I am very hopeful. I am remembering. It is also helping me healing up, and also I am getting hopeful because all of us are joining hands together, and I have that belief that all together we'll come up with something that will that is not very far, that we'll have we have the due recognition, due acknowledgement. I will end with saying just one sentence, like the basic problem right at the moment is either people are denying the fact that had happened in Bangladesh, or people are ignorant. So we have two different fronts to cover. This is a challenge because who does not know or who do not know, our role would be how to actually bring them in to let them know, and who are denying, our task could be all together. We need to face them, and we need to actually challenge them so that the truth come out. So thank you very much for inviting me, and also the Foreign Secretary, Honorable Foreign Secretary is here. Thank you very much to you and everybody, Adam Muller, Professor Stanton, Honorable High Commissioner, Imran Azad, and Hilal Muhyiddin, and Kausar Ahmed. All of you. Thank you all.
Thank you, Dr. Tawhid, for I would say a very touching and moving testimony of what happened in 71 with regards to his father. So, ladies and gentlemen, we are very conscious about time, and we have one last panelist today, and he's from Museum for Liberation War Museum in Dhaka. And Dr. Imran is Assistant Professor of Law at the Bangladesh University of Professional, and he's the coordinator Center for the Study of Genocide and Justice, Liberation War Museum. And I would request him to kindly keep his remarks very brief, just to be conscious about time. Today, we also acknowledge our partner, the Liberation War Museum, and Mr. Mofidul Haq, who is away for undertaking some of the pre-designed tasks. So, Imran, floor is yours. Please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you so much for inviting Liberationer Museum. And on behalf of the Liberationer Museum, I will be speaking regarding some of the activities that we have been doing in the museum with regard to the recognition and remembrance of Bangladesh genocide. And I'll be very brief because of the time limitation, but it's very heartbreaking after listening to the horrific description and the narration of how our forefathers, our martyrs, they were actually sacrificed their lives. When I listen to Tawhid Reza Noor, this gives us makes us very emotional. But nevertheless, being the victim nation, we have the responsibility to remember and recognize the Bangladesh genocide. Not only Bangladesh genocide, but other genocides and atrocity crimes that is happening all over the world. So let me start with the, if I capture the whole philosophy of Liberation Museum, how it's basically disseminating the lessons of 1971 throughout the generations, I would reiterate what our Foreign Secretary sir has said. The sense of the message, the sense of disseminating the lessons of 1971 genocide to the successive generation. And that is the motive, that is the philosophy of Liberation Museum that has been doing over the years. One of the flagship programs that Liberation Museum has been conducting with the students from different districts, it's called Mobile Bus Museum Program and Oral History Collection Program. So through this program, every year, every month, we send our mobile bus museums to different schools, and we spend our time with the students. And we also made an appeal to the students to go back to their family members and to listen to the horrific experiences they have suffered, and to write back to the Liberation Museum so that we can preserve those narratives and those testimonies. It's very, very powerful way of connecting the grassroots people, because when we are talking about international recognition of Bangladesh genocide, I'm sure, and we have the hope that today or tomorrow we will get that recognition. But at the same time, we need to put our efforts to make sure that our local histories are protected, our local histories are preserved, and we make that world, that Bangladesh, where there is no hatred, there is much tolerance and peace in the society. So that's the very essence of Liberation Museum working. Currently, we are developing a teaching manual with the help of the UN Office on Genocide Prevention and the Responsibility to Protect, focusing on peace education, focusing on atrocity crimes, focusing on remembrance and recognition. And as Adam Moeller and Jeremy Maron have already discussed about the winter school, certificate courses, and other educational programs that Liberation Museum has been doing in Bangladesh. Just to finish up my talk here, I would like to connect that how Liberation Museum has been encouraging people like me who didn't witness 1971. We are the post-1971 generation, the 90s generation. We didn't actually see the horrific experience of genocide, but we have heard about genocide, heard about liberation histories in our textbook, and we have been through the distortion of history in different times. So we would like to see our national efforts, both by national governments, civil society organizations, and also the international friends, so that we can have a kind of history that actually inspires us, that actually connect the present generation to the past, the 1971, and that's where we can develop and we can make a future Bangladesh. Just to give an example from our museum, the very foundation of our museum is the volunteerism. So in my university life, I have been associated with the museum as a volunteer. So when 2017, when the Rohingya atrocities started, so from the museum, we went to the camps, we collected the testimonies from the Rohingya survivors. That was the very first time we were exposed with the victims of atrocity crimes. In my life and in the lives of all of us who went there, we didn't actually witness that kind of testimonies and that kind of horrific experiences directly coming out from the victims of Rohingya genocide. And still now we are connected with the Rohingya victims. So Liberation Museum is a platform where we try to connect our present generation with the lessons of 1971, with the histories of 1971. And I think, and to conclude with the message that Dr. Gregory Stanton has said, that recognition is as important as healing the wounds. Maybe we would not be able to heal all the wounds of the martyrs of and the family members of martyrs of 1971 genocide, but if we get that recognition both from nationally and also internationally, and also making aware our young generation, the present generation, maybe that would be another kind of tribute that we can pay to the memory of our 1971 survivors and the victims. So with that note, again, thank you so much for inviting Liberation Museum in this webinar. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Imran, for beautiful words and the works of Liberation War Museum. The audience, we are absolutely at the end of the session. At this point, I would like to go back. Go back to His Excellency first, then our Honorable Foreign Secretary, who is patiently with us for almost an hour and a half now, and finally with the keynote speaker, Dr. Gregory Stanton. But before I let them speak, it is also time to recognize Dr. Hilal Mohiuddin, who is the pioneer in submission of the exhibit proposal that happened back in 2014-15 in the heydays of Museum for Human Rights. Dr. Mohiuddin is also the co-founder of Conflict and Resilience Research Institute, Canada. Dr. Hilal, if you just mention very briefly, because we need to go back to our keynote speaker and others, that will be appreciated. Floor is yours. Go ahead.
On behalf of the Conflict and Resilience Research Institute, Canada, I am thanking everyone, all the distinguished guests here, and the insights that we have drawn today. I will be just making a simple point that genocide is genocide, like sunrise is sunrise and sunset is sunset. It's very clear. In clear terms, we need to understand that, especially my takeaway today, I should say that there are two things, truth and reconciliation. It's not a teaching from Canada only. Now it's a global teaching. We are talking about peace education and human rights and social justice. So these are the three broad frameworks that we are dealing with. And in dealing with these three biggest terms, I think genocide needs to be treated, to my understanding and to our understanding, our organization's understanding, it needs to be treated as a global issue, and that should not be denied in any form. And the denial that is taking place is never gonna help anyone, especially if we go to draw any parallel like the Rohingya genocide. Bangladesh genocide needed to be recognized long ago. It's long overdue already. And we need to work hard for that so that we can also gradually proceed to other genocides like Rohingya genocides. And we are foreseeing some other problems all around us because of different types of wars that are emerging in the global context. Probably we'll be able to talk something, we'll be able to press our demands to have a peaceful world for the world community in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Halal. The audience, let me once again bring His Excellency for his very brief remarks. He requested to have the floor once again. His Excellency, sir, please go ahead.
Sir, thank you. First of all, it was my oversight to not recognize Professor Sadeka Halim. She has been with us since the inception of the center and has been a source of inspiration for the work of the center. And also Tawhid Rizanur, I know him and his family as well, because I can feel the kind of pain he and his family suffered from the 1971 genocide, because my family was also affected. One point I like to just add here. What I heard from Professor Sadiqa Halim and Tawhid Rizanur, they brought up an issue that is very important in today's context. That is if you look at the Bangladesh genocide in 1971, the extremist anti-secular forces were the collaborators to perpetrate this crime. And in today's context, we can see their rise, everywhere in the world, including perhaps to some extent in our country. So, for me, today's take would be how the international community can strengthen the hands of secular forces all over the world, including Bangladesh, so that this kind of forces cannot again facilitate or collaborate to create or commit another genocide. And again, I have to say that it was the Bangladesh Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina who established the International Crimes Tribunal that tried some of these war criminals who perpetrated this genocide and aided the occupation forces to commit this crime. So with that appeal, I once again thank you all. I mean, the statements, powerful statements made by the keynote speaker and all the discussions would be our inspiration and would really inspire the center to carry out its works. And as High Commissioner, I'd be always there to support, to promote the work of the center. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Now, let me welcome once again our Honorable Foreign Secretary of People's Republic of Bangladesh, Mr. Masood bin Momen, for his concluding remarks. Sir, go ahead.
Thank you very much. It was a very rich discussion. Our friends and colleagues gave different perspectives. When I was in New York as the permanent representative of Bangladesh to the UN, Bangladesh National Parliament declared the Genocide Day, 25th of March. And immediately my task was to meet the PRs of all countries who suffered genocide, starting with Armenia, but also Rwanda, Cambodia, Bosnia-Herzegovina, Croatia, among others. And I found that different countries have different strategies and different means, and their scars are all, although similar, but they have different origins. And my most of my interactions were with the Armenian PR, and I learned a lot how Armenia tried to establish their genocide internationally recognized or have it recognized. And I met a lot of Armenians diaspora and how the diaspora helped. And I was lucky to be invited to the world premiere of a movie called The Promise. I would encourage all to see that movie. That how powerful a medium can be to actually make other people aware internationally. So the message that I got from the Armenians that it may take or may have taken more than 100 years, and they are willing to wait another 100 years by trying to establish what is right. And therefore, I thought that since the entities of the the genocide deniers are very strong even now. Therefore, we have a serious work at our hand, and it may take many years, but we should not be deterred by that, and we should make coalition alliances with and reaching out scholars like all of you, locally as well as internationally, and also keep this message alive with our new generation. So that's why the Liberation War Museum, I think, is doing a wonderful job in Dhaka. In the morning, we had a big program there where a lot of young people were also invited. Therefore, maybe the road, towards recognition is a long one, a difficult one, but we should stay focused and work relentlessly towards that objective. And I also believe that seeing is believing, and all of you, Gregory, Jeremy, and Adam, have been to Bangladesh, and I will encourage more of your colleagues and other scholars to visit Bangladesh. We'll be happy to host them in the near future, so that they also spread the word around. Thank you very much, Dr. Kausar.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. And road to recognition is, I think, the very important word and phrase that Honorable Foreign Secretary mentioned, and we must keep in mind. The audience, let me welcome Gregory Stanton once again to listen his concluding thoughts and what we should do in the future in terms of denying the genocide itself, and how do you really achieve that very and journey towards the in the road of recognition. Dr. Gregory Stanton, go ahead, sir.
Thank you. It has been a singular honor for me to be part of this commemoration and to reflect about what denial has meant and also how we can overcome it. And some, I know, would say, well, recognition, isn't it just symbolic? Isn't it merely symbolic? I can tell you, as an anthropologist, you should never couple the word merely with symbolic, because it is through symbols that people think. And in fact, that is why it is so important that we achieve recognition of this Bangladesh genocide, and that we recognize it around the world, not just politically, but also among scholars. We have before us, in fact, right now, a resolution that was proposed by Tawhid Noor to have the Bangladesh genocide recognized by the International Association of Genocide Scholars. I am sure it will pass. In fact, it would have passed the first time, but for technical reasons, it is now up for a vote. And so I'm sure we'll pass that as well. And by the way, Adam Muller has been a major leader in the International Association of Genocide Scholars, and we thank him for his support. But is it really merely symbolic? No, it is not. Because when you have a group of scientists, and that is what the IHS is, it's a group of experts on genocide. When you have a group of people who really studied the issue declare this was a genocide, it has a ripple effect that in fact also affects political and social and economic institutions around the world. When I hear the words merely symbolic, I've always asked, I like to respond, well, do you think that the Eucharist in a church is merely symbolic? Do you believe that the Hajj is merely symbolic? And the answer, of course, is no, because those change people's lives. And that is what the objective here is. It is to make people aware we no longer can tolerate genocide in the world. Genocide has been a scourge on mankind since probably the beginning of the human race. It is time for us to acknowledge that there are no other races. There is only one race, the human race. And so when we are commemorating this genocide today, I would ask us to remember the words of Henry Morgenthau, who was the U.S. ambassador in Constantinople or Istanbul during the Armenian genocide. He had received the reports from our diplomats all over the Ottoman Empire about the Armenian genocide, which killed probably 1.5 million Armenians. And he sought a meeting with Talat Pasha, who was one of the planners of that genocide. And he went in and talked to him and told him that it has to stop. And when he met with him, Talat Pasha asked him, "Why are you so interested in the Armenians anyway? You're a Jew. These people are Christians." And Morgenthau replied, "You don't seem to realize that I am not here as a Jew, but as the American ambassador. I do not appeal to you in the name of any race or religion, but merely as a human being." Thank you.
Such a powerful words, Gregory. Thank you so much for saying those words. The audience, let me close this session today. But before I do read out the scripted language that I have tirelessly worked last night, let me start by acknowledging that I am a graduate of Peace and Conflict Studies program. Dr. Adam Muller is the director now. I'm very proud that the training I received, because it has enabled me to continue my work in these areas. I also deeply acknowledge Canadian Museum for Human Rights and Jeremy Maron, kindred spirit, and I call him friend, and his enormous ideas and support for this cause, not only the Bangladesh genocide, but as well as Rohingya genocide cause. And I also acknowledge the father of the nation, Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, who led the nation towards the victory. And just a couple of weeks before 25th of March, he mobilized a nation for the self-determination. With these words, ladies and gentlemen, as we come to the end of this webinar on genocide recognition and remembrance, I would like to extend my sincere gratitude to all the panelists and participants for sharing their thoughts and opinions. Today's discussion has been a powerful reminder of the importance of recognizing and remembering past genocides, the impacts that they have on individuals and communities, and the moral imperative to prevent such atrocities from happening again in the future. By educating ourselves and others about these events, we can honor the memory of those who were lost and work towards creating a more compassionate and tolerant world. I hope that this webinar has been insightful for everyone, and I urge you to continue the conversation and spread awareness about the importance of genocide recognition and remembrance. Thank you once again, and deep gratitude from the center, and stay well and stay fine wherever you are. Goodbye. Thank you.